Sudan has more pyramids than Egypt, twice as many, built by the same civilization. You have probably never been told that. For nearly 100 years, from 747 to 656 BC, the pharaohs of Egypt were black African kings, not from Egypt, from what is now Sudan. They ruled the largest Egyptian empire since the New Kingdom. They restored temples that the Egyptians themselves had abandoned. They built monuments across 2 countries. And then they were erased. Their names were chiseled off stone walls. Their statues were smashed. The civilization that came after needed them gone. This is the story of the 25th Dynasty, the Black Pharaohs, and why almost nobody talks about them. To understand the 25th Dynasty, you need to understand what Egypt looked like in 747 BC. Not glorious, not powerful, fractured. The New Kingdom, the era of Ramesses, of Thutmose, of the great temple builders, was long over. Egypt had split into competing city-states. Local rulers fought each other. Temples fell into disrepair. The priesthood at Thebes had accumulated so much power, they effectively ran a state within the state. Egypt was, by any measure, in decline. Now travel south, down the Nile, past the first cataract, past the second, into what the Egyptians had called Nubia, and what its own people called Kush. The Kingdom of Kush was not a backwater. It was a civilization. It had developed its own script, Meroitic, still only partially deciphered today. It had its own architectural tradition.
It controlled the trade routes connecting sub-Saharan Africa to the Mediterranean world. It mined gold. It bred horses. It had built its own pyramids, steeper than Egypt's, more numerous, and still standing. And crucially, the Kushite elite had been deeply influenced by Egyptian culture for centuries. They worshipped Amun. They built in Egyptian style. They considered themselves the true inheritors of the Egyptian religious tradition, more so than the corrupt, fragmented rulers who now sat in Egypt's delta cities. This is important. When Piye marches north, he is not, in his own mind, invading a foreign country. He is restoring one. In approximately 747 BC, a Kushite king named Piye marches north into Egypt. What follows is documented in extraordinary detail on the Victory Stele of Piye, a granite slab nearly 2 meters tall, discovered in 1862 at Jebel Barkal in Sudan, now in the Cairo Museum. It is one of the longest inscriptions from ancient Egypt, and it reads not like military propaganda, but like the account of a man genuinely offended by what he found. Piye is furious, not at the Egyptians' resistance, but at their neglect of the temples, at their horses being poorly kept, at the sacred sites being dishonored. He does not describe himself as a conqueror. He describes himself as a restorer. City after city submits. Memphis, Egypt's ancient capital, falls after a brief siege. The northern rulers come before Piye. They prostrate themselves. Some are allowed to keep their positions under his authority. Others are removed. And then, this is the part that should permanently change how you see this story. Piye goes home. He takes his tribute. He takes his confirmation of divine authority. He leaves administrators in place. And he returns to Napata, his capital in Sudan, and apparently never comes back to Egypt again. He does not want Egypt for himself. He wants it correct. He is crowned pharaoh of all Egypt, upper and lower, the 2 crowns. And the dynasty he founds, the 25th, will hold that title for nearly 100 years. The greatest ruler of the 25th dynasty, arguably one of the greatest rulers in all of ancient African history, was Taharqa. He came to power around 690 BC. He ruled for 26 years. Under Taharqa, the Kushite Egyptian Empire reached its fullest extent and its greatest building program. At Karnak, Already one of the most impressive temple complexes ever built, Taharqa added a colonnade of colossal proportions. The single surviving column from his construction there stands 21 meters tall. At Kawa, in Sudan, he built a temple complex that remained in use for centuries. At Jebel Barkal, the sacred mountain that the Kushites believed was the home of Amun, he constructed and expanded temples cut directly into the rock face. He sent diplomats to the Mediterranean powers. He was known to the Assyrians, the Greeks, the rulers of the ancient Near East, not as a peripheral king, but as a major player. Taharka's face appears on some of the finest sculpture ever produced in the ancient world. The bronze Taharqa Sphinx in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, made during his reign, shows a face of extraordinary presence. The uraeus, the double crown, features that are distinctly and deliberately African. This is not ambiguous in the scholarship. His Nubian identity was not hidden. It was the source of his authority. He was, by any reasonable assessment, one of the most powerful rulers on earth during his reign. And then, the Assyrians arrived. The Assyrian Empire in the 7th century BC was the most militarily efficient killing machine the ancient world had yet produced. Iron weapons, cavalry, siege technology, a command structure built entirely around conquest. Esarhaddon, the Assyrian king, invaded Egypt in 671 BC. He drove Taharqa out of Memphis. He sacked the city. He installed his own puppet rulers in the delta. Taharqa fought back. He retook Memphis. The war continued under his successor, Tutankhamun. But the Assyrians came again under Ashurbanipal.
They pushed further south. They sacked Thebes, one of the most sacred cities in the ancient world, a city that had stood for over 1,000 years, and they looted it on a scale that shocked even the ancient world. Tutankhamun retreated to Nubia. The 25th Dynasty's rule over Egypt was over. But note this carefully. The Kushite kingdom did not end. It retreated. It regrouped. The Napatan and later Meroitic kingdoms continued for another 1,000 years until the 4th century AD. The 25th Dynasty lost Egypt. It did not lose itself. Here is where the story becomes something else entirely. After the 25th Dynasty, the rulers who followed, the Site 26th Dynasty, the Persians, the Ptolemies, eventually the Romans, had reasons to rewrite the past. Egypt's cultural memory was curated by those who held power next after the founders. The 25th Dynasty's cartouches, the royal name rings carved on temple walls, were in some cases chiseled out and replaced. Their building projects were sometimes attributed to others. Their contributions at Karnak were partially absorbed into the broader temple record without clear attribution. This was not uniform. Some of their monuments survived intact, particularly in Sudan, where Egyptian political authority could not reach. The Meroe pyramids stand today. The temples at Kawa and Jebel Barkal still carry Taharqa's name. But in the Western academic tradition, in the history that was codified primarily in the 19th and 20th centuries, the 25th Dynasty was treated as a footnote. When European scholars reconstructed Egyptian history, they were also, consciously or not, making decisions about which parts of that history fit their broader ideas about civilization, about Africa, about who built what. The 25th Dynasty was inconvenient for those narratives. A black African dynasty that restored Egypt's greatest temples, ruled the largest empire in the region, and produced some of the finest sculpture of the ancient world. That story did not come comfortably into 19th century European frameworks for understanding Africa.
So it was reduced, marginalized, made into a minor chapter, or left out entirely. You are living with those editorial decisions right now. This is probably the first time you've heard Piye's name. The Kingdom of Kush outlasted the Roman Empire. Let that sit for a moment. Rome, the civilization that Western history treats as the apex of the ancient world, fell in 476 AD.
The Meroitic kingdom, the direct descendant of the 25th Dynasty's Kushite state, had already ended, but it persisted until roughly the 4th century AD, having endured for over 1,000 years after losing Egypt. Sudan's pyramids, steeper, more numerous, less famous than Egypt's, are visible today from satellite. They were built over centuries by a civilization that the world barely knows. Taharka's name is on temple walls in 2 countries. His sphinx is in Boston. His column still stands at Karnak. Piye's Victory Stele sits in the Cairo Museum, the longest royal inscription of its era, recording a conquest so total and so principled that its author went home afterward. These are not obscure figures. They are simply not famous. That is a choice that was made. It can be unmade. The 25th Dynasty ruled Egypt. They restored its temples, built its monuments, and commanded its armies. They were African. They were Kushite. They were Pharaoh. That is the history. If this is new to you, it shouldn't be, but it is, because of choices made a long time ago by people with reasons to make them. Subscribe. There are more stories like this. A lot more.